All right, so this time we're going to talk a little bit about settings some more. We're going to look at some different settings inside of Avid Media Composer, some settings that people sometimes don't really look at, but we'll talk about what they mean and how you can access them and what you can do with them. So what we're going to talk about here is in the source browser. So we can go here to File, Input, Source Browser, and look at some settings inside the source browser, and we're here inside the source browser. Now I have this project called the Imports project here, and I have this new folder here on my drive called the imports folder drive. And we're going to look at some import settings. So here it says imports, and then next to this, you have your import settings. And some people don't look at this, but we're going to look at this and what this means. And I want to look at this first category under the image tab called image size adjustments. And they offer this question of image size for current format, crop pad for DV scanline difference, do not resize smaller images, or resize image to fit format raster. Well, let's talk about what that's referring to. So we have this image of this giraffe here. I can show you this giraffe on the desktop here. Let's see, in my drive here, under imports, I have this picture of this giraffe. Got this something in it. And this is a weird shape. This is a weird shape giraffe. I mean, giraffes are always weird shape, but the image itself is kind of a weird kind of, portrait style shape of an image here. And it says that this image here is 540 by 614, and that's the size of this here. Well, if I import this and I choose image size for current format, that's assuming that inside my project, that my format of my project is 1920 by 1080, and I'm working in 1920 by 1080. And so what it's going to do, it's going to assume that this is 1920 by 1080, or at least comparable to 1920 by 1080, maybe 3840 by 2160 or something 60 by 9, and it's going to resize it so that it fits just like that. So if you see this and you see image size for current format, we can say, okay, and we can say, let's import this giraffe, and we're going to import this, and we do, it's going to import this giraffe, and this giraffe comes in super wide, and it looks weird and awkward, and it's a fat giraffe. It's been stretched out accordingly, and that's not what we want. So that's not going to be good for us. So we're going to delete that. We'll delete the master clip and the associated media file. We'll delete both of those and say, forget about that. The other option here for the giraffe is to crop pad for DV scan line difference. This is kind of amazing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson. Back when I first started getting into video, really getting into video in my college days, we were working with DV, mini DV tape and DV cam footage on tape. It was a thing. I started working with in analog with VHS and SVHS and beta, but when I really got into it, I got into DV. I had a mini DV player and a mini DV camera and those kind of things. Well, mini DV had a scan line issue. Standard video was in 720 by 486. Mini DV was in 720 by 480. And so there was just 6 lines missing. They just rounded down and made DV 720 by 480 as opposed to 720 by 486. Someone smarter than me can probably tell you why, but that's just what they did. And so this accounts for the idea that there's a difference between regular 720 by 486 and 720 by 480. Here's the truth. Most people aren't using digital video, DV cam, or mini DV tape anymore. And most people aren't even working in standard definition anymore. This, completely outdated. I guess if you're working with archival footage that happens to be on DV, you can adjust for that difference of size because you're working in an S video project or you're working in a standard video project. That's kind of ridiculous. But that's there. Avid's never going to get rid of it. It's going to be there forever. Avid never throws anything away, so it's been there forever. The next option is do not resize smaller images. And that says, hey, bring this image in at 540 by 614, and we're going to say, okay. And now when we bring in our giraffe, we're going to bring in our giraffe, and we're going to say, hey, bring this in at its regular size. And you're going to see it's super small. Compared to the 1920 by 1080 frame, it is super small. This would be great if you had something that was like made in Photoshop or made as a bug or a lower third or something, and you wanted it to be that exact size. You didn't want it to scale up to be the same size as the project. You didn't want it to be the same size as your sequences, and so you just wanted it to be small. And it was made to be small in the screen, and you didn't want to size it up and have it be there. So that is another option of do not resize smaller images. Hard thing to say. Anyway, so there's an option there. We're going to delete that. And we're going to go to the last option here, We'll delete this. And the last option says resize to fit format raster. And this is actually the one that I like the best. Most often, I like this one the best. This is resize to fit format raster. And what that means is it's going to make this bigger, but it's not going to stretch it out to fit the entire frame. It's going to stretch it out to fit basically top to bottom, basically the size of top to bottom there. So it's mostly, if it's taller, it's going to take 540 and take 540, and 540 double would be 1080. So it's going to double this in size, but not stretch it, not like this one does, the image size for current format. This is not going to stretch it. We're going to say okay to that, and I'll take a look at this and say import, and then boom. You're going to see the giraffe fits full screen, but he has not been stretched out. He's still as skinny as he was. He's got, sidebars on there. And so that's your fourth option of those kind of things. So those are your four options. If you see that and you're bringing in footage that's in some kind of a weird resolution and it doesn't work for you, that's the reason why. So moving on, we'll go to here, and we have color levels. Do not modify, treat as legal range, or scale from full range to legal range. This is for the fact that a lot of times in video, you have a legal range of what can be broadcast. And in computers, you can make things brighter or darker or more color intense than those things. If you're working on the internet and you're working for, social media or something, you might say, do not modify, treat as legal range, and just say, hey, we're fine. This option would reduce the image down to what will broadcast. So your regular broadcast networks can cover them, because broadcast signals don't work with a full range of what a computer graphics can handle. Computer graphics can handle super bright and super dark, and video can't handle that there. So you don't have those options there. Now, the weird thing that happens here with importing, we'll skip over filtering for a second, but the weird thing happens with importing. When you're importing, and we talked about this before, but when you're importing, you are turning this into a video file. You're turning this into a video file that Avid can play. It's not the same thing as linking it in. When you're importing, you're converting it to some video format that Avid can play. So it makes a video, and it's going to make a video, and it asks you, well, how long do you want your video to be? A single frame is not going to be a single frame long. That would be purposeless, but it's going to make this a single frame, and it's going to ask you, hey, how long do you want it to be? Well, the default here is 30 seconds, but if you don't want it to be 30 seconds, you could import this and make this 10 seconds and bring this in for 10 seconds and make a 10-second file. So you can just say, okay, and then there, when we import the giraffe again, we'll import the giraffe and we'll bring it in here, and now it's just a 10-second file. And this is a 10-second piece of video. So if you were to go here and right click and say reveal file, this put this on the Macintosh hard drive, and here it is. This is this 1.2 megabyte 10-second file that's here, and it put it there. So that came in as an actual 10-second file. This will only play for 10 seconds. That's how it works. So you do have a limitation there of when you bring this in. If you wanted to play back, not in some weird, graphic format, but actually to play back in a video format that Avid can appreciate and can work with, you're going to work with there. So let's take a look at more import settings here, and then we're going to go through these import settings here. There's a little checkbox at the bottom called Auto Detect Sequentially Numbered Files. Ooh, what does this mean? Well, if you are working in 3D modeling, a lot of people who work in 3D modeling, when they export their 3D model animation, they will export the 3D model animation as a series of still pictures. The reason they do that is because 3D modeling takes a lot of rendering, and sometimes it's a lot of work. And to export it as a QuickTime movie may take hours, may take days. I've created 3D model stuff, and it took me 17 minutes per frame to export it. That's like 3 days for a 10-second file. It takes a lot of rendering, and it's sometimes safer just to export single frames, one frame at a time. It'll go all the frames in a row, but it'll create this list of sequentially numbered frames. And so here, for example, I have this footage here of this 3D model that I made here. We're going to go here into my imports folder, and we're going to look at this 3D model. This is a little 3D model of a robot that I made. And this 3D model, he just stands there like this. And this is frame 0000. So it has this name called frame 000. And as it goes through, it stands there for a couple seconds, and then it starts to move and dance and do this animation. And these are all the frames it is. This is a whole bunch of frames moving here, moving through this animation. It's basically going through and doing this whole animation here. And this is every single frame. So if we look at this here in list view, you can see literally how this looks. all these little frames here. I'm just hitting the down arrow and going frame by frame by frame and looking at this animation there. Well, we want to bring this in as a video. We don't want this to be a still animation. We want this to be a video that looks like a video. And so we're going to bring this in as a video. And so here in this guy, we're going to go here and say, click on the first one. And all we have to do is click on the first one. And it says auto detect sequentially numbered files. And we'll say, okay. And when we bring this in, we import this, it turns it magically into a video, creating media from TIFF sequence right there. And when we're done with this, it will create a media from the TIFF sequence. Here it goes. Taking a little bit of time, but it works. And we'll process this and import this. And now here, this video looks like this. And he dances and he moves around, he spins around like so. And that's basically what he does, and that's how he works. And so if you have that, or if, for example, you're taking time-lapse photography, say, for example, you're shooting time-lapse, you have one of those cameras that can shoot one frame every, 1 minute or something, and you want to, I don't know, you want to shoot the sunrise opening up, and you get up early in the morning at 5 o'clock and you just leave your camera there on the beach, and you say, I'm going to take a picture every minute, and then I'm going to turn into a 30-second file of the sun rising really quickly like there. You can do that. If you want to do that, that's going to be in the settings, auto detect sequentially numbered files, because it's going to take a number of still pictures and you're going to bring it in as a sequentially numbered files. Now, last thing we're going to go on to in this category is here. I have this giraffe, and we talked about having the giraffe. I'm going to look at the giraffe again here. We're going to back out to the giraffe and see the giraffe. So this is this giraffe. This giraffe looks like a giraffe, and this is a full video giraffe here. But I also have this giraffe, and this giraffe has what is called alpha information. And what is alpha information? Well, it's a little piece of information that exists in the photo or in the video that says, hey, some of these pixels are transparent. So you may be familiar that some pixels will be broken down into different colors. So you'll have different colors of pixels, and each pixel will have different information there. And so in this, we have some pixels that are more red and some pixels that are more blue and some pixels that are equal amounts of red, green, and blue. And those are the color channels. And so there's another channel here that you can see in here that says, hey, these pixels are invisible. These pixels don't show up. And this is a piece of information called alpha. It basically tells, it's a little bit of embedded data that says, hey, when you bring this into another program, bring it in with these parts being invisible. So I'll show you how this works. In here, we have in the import settings, it says about the alpha channel. And for here, if we bring in the giraffe and we say, ignore the alpha channel. So we say, ignore the alpha channel here. Alpha channel, ignore it. When we bring this in, and we were to say, let's bring in this image here, say, ignore the alpha channel, and we'll say, import this. We'll just import this here. We're going to have this giraffe, and this giraffe is going to look like this. Whoops, sorry, wrong giraffe. Oh, wrong giraffe. Let me bring the giraffe with alpha. There we go. And this giraffe with alpha is going to come in without alpha, which just means it's going to look like this, which is not how we want this to look. It looks kind of weird. It looks kind of awkward, and it doesn't really work for us at all. And it's not there. And if we try to superimpose this on top of something else, if we went, for example, and we said, let's grab in a different clip here. Let's just link in a clip of this, this deer here. Bring the deer and the giraffe. We'll just link this in here. And I brought the deer into my project, and I said, hey, here's my deer. And I'm going to make a new video track, Command Y, and I'm going to go up to another video layer and say, yeah, let's put on top of this layer, let's put this picture of this giraffe. And so we're just going to put this giraffe up here. This giraffe, well, let me make it a little shorter here. It's a little shorter. Oh, it's only 10 seconds long. And the deer shot is a little bit longer. So we'll take this from here to here. We'll go here and we'll get rid of the F key to get rid of the in point. We'll just have the out point, and we'll just say overwrite. And now we have this giraffe. So this giraffe is here. It's completely over this and superimposed over this. And the black is black. It's not invisible. It's black. And that's a problem. That's called the alpha channel. We ignored the alpha channel and just said, hey, whatever is supposed to be back there, make it black. And so that's a problem. And so that's not what we're going to do. So we're going to take this giraffe with alpha. We're going to delete this, get rid of this media. It's going to get rid of it here. Boom. Yep, sure, we're going to delete it. And now it's not there anymore. We'll go here and we'll just kind of mark this and we'll just X this out. And so now it's gone. So now this time we're going to go to source browser, input source browser, and we're going to go here to the back to the imports and go to this giraffe with alpha. And now we're going to say import bring this in with alpha. And we say, cool, bring this in with alpha. And we say, do not invert. And we choose do not invert. That sounds great. Do not invert. Why would we want to invert it? I don't know. We don't need to auto-detect sequentially numbered files. And this is the thing to be careful of. Be careful of this. I promise you, when you're working inside of here, you'll turn on the auto-detect sequentially numbered files, and then you'll forget to turn off auto-detect sequentially numbered files. And the problem that will occur is that if you bring in a bunch of images from your phone or from your camera, and they are listed, image 001 and image 002 and image 003, and if they're in the same folder, and I've done this before. I've gone on the internet. I was looking for a picture of a dog or something, and I looked at one dog, and I was like, I'll call this dog 1. And then I looked at another one. I was like, maybe this dog's better. And I called it dog 2. And then I brought another one and called it dog 3. Well, guess what? When I went to import dog 1, it brought it in as a 3-frame video sequence, just dog 1, dog 2, dog 3, right in a row. It was crazy. Be careful of that. That's a thing. So we're not going to invert, and we're going to say, okay, do not invert. And we're going to import this and bring this in here, giraffe with alpha, and import this into here. And then we bring this giraffe in. It puts us in, and it looks like this. Oh, that's weird. If we took this, just for fun, we took this and we threw this down on the timeline. Right here, we said, boom, overwrite this down the timeline, it would look like this. Oh, that's backwards. Well, here's the thing. You probably guessed that if it's asking you a question like, do you want to invert the alpha channel? Well, what the heck does that mean? Why would you want to invert the alpha channel? Well, you probably want to invert the alpha channel because that's probably the good thing to do. Here's the thing. Most graphics programs work with alpha. So Photoshop, After Effects, most graphic programs out there work with alpha in a certain way. And the way that they work with alpha is they say that there's a piece of information in this that shows the part that it keeps and the part that it gets rid of. It's actually a black and white color pattern that shows basically what is kept and what's gotten rid of. In Avid and in other programs, video editing programs, except for Premiere, in other video editing programs, it gives some different information. And here it says, do not invert. The black is the opaque. Well, here inside of Avid, invert on import, the white is opaque. And the fact they're asking for this is 9 times out of 10, if you're bringing in some kind of graphics that you got from Photoshop or you got from After Effects, or even if you got it off the internet, you are probably coming in and saying, invert the alpha channel and make the white the opaque. And so we're going to say that, okay. And now we bring in the giraffe and we say, okay, import this giraffe with alpha. And we bring this in, and it comes in here. And it comes in with a little effect built into it. So we talked about before that you can take effects, you can kind of save layers with effects. And so this is the giraffe with the effect. And now, this is what we want, right? This is golden right here. So now we can take this, we'll close the source browser, and we can put this here in the timeline. And now the giraffe is in the wilderness. And that's a giraffe with a proper alpha channel like so. So I would say that 9 times out of 10, you're going to invert the alpha unless you were doing something weird. But that is called the alpha channel. That just says, hey, this is coming in not as black. This black is invisible. It's transparency. That is your alpha information. It's a thing to know. It's a thing you should know and should be familiar with as an idea. We'll leave these up here. We'll keep these there. We'll get rid of the sequence. I don't think we need the sequence. I don't know. Maybe we'll leave it. Maybe we'll do something crazy and something wacky here. So certain videos, certain photos will have alpha information. We'll look at those there. The next thing I want to look at in another setting is when we link footage in source browser, we're going to link some things in. There's some controls we have in terms of settings, some things we can adjust in terms of how settings interpret and how we look at settings and how they work. So I'm going to bring in this footage here of this canoe. And this canoe here, in case we're wondering, is coming in at 3840 by 2160. So it's coming in here at 3840 by 2160. If I import this, what's going to happen, and this happens naturally, is when I import this, this comes in and it gets reduced down to 1920 by 1080. So it stretches this down and makes all the frames, or all the pixels. It makes this a quarter size, 1920 by 1080, or half and half size. It makes this smaller and fits this into 1920 by 1080, and that's it. The video is now 1920 by 1080. So I don't have that high, semi ultra HD resolution that I would have before. I don't have that there. So let me go here and link this in. And when I link this in, I can choose link, and I can bring this in here like there. And so I have this linked shot of this canoe on the river here, this little canoe guy here. there at the park. And so it's here. Well, there's a control here. If you right click on the layer that says source settings, so it's right there, source settings. The first one on the list gives you source settings. And we'll talk about some ideas of source settings. The ones I want to talk about today is if there's a linked plugin, we can talk about that, but there's not in this footage. So we're going to talk about color encoding, frame flex, and playback rates as an idea. So let's talk about color encoding first off the bat. And the color encoding asks some questions about this. And this is where we get into a category of things called LUTs, or what are called lookup tables. And I'll try to explain what those mean to the best of my abilities. If you're not familiar with them, how they work. There's an interesting world going on right now in the world of video production and the world of film production, where camera people are being asked to do a specific thing. Because color correction in post-production has become such a popular way of working, a lot of camera operators, a lot of video operators, if you have a camera, there's a way that you can shoot your camera in what's called neutral or flat. You can set your settings so that your camera does not adjust the image to make it look sharper, or to make it look more vibrant, or to make it look brighter, or to make it look more colorful or more saturated. Cameras will do that. Cameras by default, in their default regular settings, if you just, take your camera out of the box and start shooting video, it does stuff to it. It does a little bit of internal color correction to make it look not so boring and not so basic. And this is basically a color profile. Now, by default, color correctionists, people who do color correction in post in Avid or DaVinci Resolve or something like that, don't want you to do that. They don't want you to add this color treatment. It's like I use this analogy where I say, if you were a celebrity chef, if you were some fancy executive chef at some rich and fancy restaurant, and you sent one of your employees out to go get chicken for your brilliant chicken dinner, that your chicken marsala that you were going to make, you wouldn't send your employee out to go get seasoned chicken, right? You wouldn't send him out to go get some kind of specialized, seasoned at the grocery store chicken, because you don't trust the grocery store, food meat preparer would know what to do with seasoning. You're a celebrity chef. You're a big, fancy, high-profile chef. You want to season it yourself. So what a lot of people are asking for is asking camera people, hey, give me the bland chicken. Give me just raw chicken that I can make and I can use. I can do whatever I want to it. So give me some bland footage. So you'll notice that this footage here, for example, this footage is pretty dry. It's pretty basic, pretty flat. There's not anything really high contrast about this. It's not really vibrant or anything really poking out at you. And some people will look at this and say, oh, this footage looks really kind of lousy. It's not really, really intense. And I really wanted some good looking images. And the camera person is like, hey, listen, I wanted to shoot it looking really intense and I wanted to get, good money for this. But, I understand that the post guy wants it to look really boring, really flat, really basic, because, if I want this to look sharp, I'll make it look sharp. And that's the post-production's perspective. If I want this to look vibrant, I will add vibrance to this and make this look super vibrant. But for here, give me boring, give me basic, give me flat. Well, you can have kind of the best of both worlds. And this is what's called a lookup table. So it's going to ask you here what the source color space is. And the source color space is, right now we are working, I think this is working in probably Rec 709. This is probably Rec 709 in video levels here. So we're going to say Rec 709. That's the source space that we're working here. But now we have this thing called a color adapter. And the color adapter type here, it says color adapter generic, and it says color adapter, and we can choose from some of these basic color adapters that exist inside of Avid. And so Avid says, hey, we want to go from basic Rec 709 and we want to go to something else. We want to say that this footage, if this footage was shot with a Canon camera, we want to go from, say, Rec 709 to C-Log or something like there. So we can go from here. We can go from Canon C-Log to Rec 709, and we can add this color adapter. And you'll see this is what's called a color adapter, or what's called a lookup table, or a LUT. People like saying the word LUT. So we're going to add this here and see what this does to the image and how this affects the image. And we say, cool. And now we say, okay, now my image looks a little bit brighter, a little bit more darker in the dark spots, a little bit more vibrant. That's okay. That's a little bit of color adaptation that the camera would do. And if we like that, we like that. That's some basic color adaptation that we can do. I keep saying adaptation. That's not a real word. Forgive me. And so that's a little color adaptation that we can do. And you'll see other basic color adapters. So you can explore this. If you're getting to real color correction, you can say, this would be the ARRI Alexa to log C Rec 709. We can do this and say, boom, add this in here and boom. Oh, look at that. We say, okay. And all of a sudden my image goes, whoo, look at how vibrant and cool that looks. And, the director may come in and say, hey, this photo looks great. But the color correctionist may come in and say, hey, I can't work with this. This is already too vibrant. I don't want, look, I've already peeked out some of these, I don't know, what are these lily pads? I've already, I can't do anything with this. And now it's, you brought me seasoned chicken already. And now I have to, wash off the seasoning to put my own seasoning on it. I don't want that. And that's going to be a problem. So you have these color spaces, source settings, color spaces, and we can add them and remove them. We say, hey, we don't want it, get rid of it. So, give me the bland chicken. And if you want to go to the grocery store and you want to give me a seasoning pack, just a little packet of seasoning that, the guy at the grocery store said was great. Sure. Give me the seasoning pack. Maybe I'll use it. Maybe I'll use it temporarily to give a sense of an idea of what we're doing. But then later, I'm not going to use the seasoning pack. I'm going to do it myself and I'm going to be there. And so a lot of people who do films will work and say, hey, give me a seasoning pack. I'm making an old Western. I'm making a Western and I want something that looks, like an old Western. Give me a seasoning pack that I can just put on there temporarily and say, okay, this is what it's going to look like when I actually do color correct it. Because as a director, as a visionary, I have an idea of what I want this to look like and how I want this to flow. And so I need a certain look for my thing. I need some kind of, a bleach bypass or some kind of a sepia tone there, just a little bit of browns in there to make it look like so. Now, one of the things you can do is rather than use the generic color adapter, you can use a user installed LUT. And here in the user installed LUT, we can go to the color management settings because right now we don't have any user installed LUT. So we're going to go to color management settings and we're going to look for select a LUT file. And we're going to select a LUT file and I'm going to go here. And I believe somewhere on my computer, I have some LUTs on here. So we can bring in some LUTs here. Let's see what I have. Maybe in here. Let's take a look. In here, I have. I'm gonna have to search for them. LUTs, and we'll search for my LUTs, and we'll see what we have. Shared LUTs. No, this is the Avid file. Nope, sorry. Hold on a second. Let me find them. So here, sorry, I found them. And here in my downloads folder, I have this folder here called 35 free LUTs. And these are LUTs I grabbed off the internet from someplace, and I have these different LUTs. And we can bring in these different LUTs here and have different examples of these LUTs and say, we're going to say, okay, and bring these LUTs inside of here. So we're going to go select LUT file, and here in the downloads folder, 35 free LUTs. Yeah, okay, cool. 35 free LUTs, and we'll just grab all these and see if we can bring them in. We'll bring them in one at a time, or we'll bring in a bunch of them. And so now I have all these different LUTs here, and I'm going to say open and say bring in all these LUTs. And now I have these list of LUTs that I have available. Cool. And so they're now usable inside my system. And so I say, okay, cool. We're going to close this. And now they're here inside there. And now I can try these different LUTs. I don't know. You want to try Clouseau 54? Yeah, let's add this in, see what it does. Oh, that's interesting. If you don't like it, you can delete it. If you want to go here to some other kind of LUT, you can try Django 25 and add that in. Boom, that does that. So our image looks like that. So if you want to look for something, and you can sometimes work with a color correctionist or a colorist, and you can say, hey, I'm looking for a certain tone, and they'll come up with a kind of a seasoning pack for you that will give you some kind of certain look to how your image should look. So that is your basic LUT, basically there. Again, and that's there. And if you don't want that, source settings, click on it, delete it. You don't have that anymore, and you can go back to the original raw, piece of chicken right there. Anyway, so that's that there. The next thing we're going to talk about is under source settings here is what's called frame flex. So we talked about before, we linked this footage in. And since we linked this footage in, this footage retains all the regular 3840 by 2160 attributes to it. Well, now we want to do a technique called punching in. So we know that our project right now is 1920 by 1080, and our footage is 3840 by 2160. They're both 60 by 9, but now we want to make this a little bit more workable. We want to get a closer shot of this canoe guy here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the size of this. So we're going to punch in. We're going to go here into the frame flex control. This is what it calls the ability to adjust the size. We're going to go to frame flex control, and we're going to go down to 50%. And here, we're going to go here to 50%. We're going to say 50%, going here, and now it's going to show this part of the image. And we can actually move this. We can click and drag and move this and be like, okay, we want just this. This is 1920 by 1080 because this is only a quarter of the size, or 50 and 50 of the size. And we've moved this right to here. So now we have this image, even though originally we had this huge image, now we're looking at just this. So we say okay to this, and now this is here, and now we have, you know, the canoe guy. And this is what we needed. This is the part of the image we needed. So we asked the camera person, yeah, take a really huge wide shot of this. You're in 4K, you're in 8K, you have tons of pixels. And so let's take all those pixels, let's get the wide shot. And then we'll decide later on that we want the frame to look like this. Or maybe we want more trees. So now we're going to go here into source settings and say, yeah, let's go to source settings and let's put this like this. So it's more trees. And now our shot is like this, and that's the framing we wanted to go for. But because we have so many pixels, and because we're finishing or we're exporting in 1920 by 1080, we have the smaller resolution there. We can play with this. We can move this. And now in here, one of the things we can do is we bring this in here. We're just going to get rid of this giraffe here, and we'll just put this sequence in here. We're going to grab this, and we're going to hit add this in here onto video track 1. One of the controls we have is we can. Take this footage. Let me take video 2 and move it over. Let me take this and put this in here. And so this footage, since this has been adjusted with frame flex is an effect that exists inside of here. So if we go into effect mode, it becomes basically a segment effect. And the segment effect says, hey, the color adapter is on here. And the frame flex says, hey, now we could do like a push in, for example. We could go here from 50 by 50. We could go here out at this point to be 50 by 50. And at the beginning of this, we could bring this out to 100 by 100. So this would actually take, you know, theoretically reduce the size of this so it's this big. But then as it goes, it pushes in. And it gives us this dual screen to show us what the box is doing and what the final result will be. This is how it looks at this. It's a weird way of looking at it, but here we're going to have this push in where it's going to push in like this and get a little bit closer as it goes. They're like, so we'll hop out of effect mode here, and we'll go back to this image and we'll look at this, how this looks. And now it's doing a kind of a push in. So we're doing a push in post because we have, you know, double the number of pixels on both the height and the width. We can push in and still end up with the same resolution. A little bit of shaky footage there. That's just in there, but we can do some kind of animation there. And that is that idea of working with frame flex. That is that option frame flex. So if, for example, you had a still image, this is a great one. If you had a still image that was like super duper huge, we'll go to imports here and we'll see, or actually we'll go to, let's take a look. Imports here, and I have an image, maybe in downloads. Let's see where this image is. Oh, it's on desktop. Sorry, desktop. In desktop, I have this image here of this concert. We're going to bring this in. We're going to go here and we're going to link this in. So this image is, again, 3840 by 2160. So we're going to link this in and we're going to bring this in with the links. And this footage right here looks like this. Well, we can go here and say source settings. Okay, well, the size this is there. And if we don't know, if we can't do the math, we can't figure out 50% would be fitting in the comp. There's actually a button right here that says size matches project raster. And here it'll go 50%. So say, for example, you had some picture that was some weird resolution, 4944 by 3257 or some weird kind of combination there. And you're like, I can't do the math of how small would be 1920 by 1080. How much would I reduce this by to be 1920 by 1080? I can't figure that out. And so you can just hit this button and it just automatically puts this to 50, which 3840 by 2160, 3840, half of that is 1920, 2160, half of that is 1080. It fits in 1920 by 1080. We'll say, okay. And again, we'll put this in here as well. We'll just kind of throw this in here. This little 10-second file in here. And then here we have this 10-second file. But again, if you go into settings, in here in settings, you can say, hey, maybe we want to start, maybe we want to end with this much of the frame, just in the concert, but maybe we want to start with this being back to 100. So now we can do this kind of push in. And maybe we do some kind of push in and it kind of moves over. Maybe here at this point, we say, hey, let's move position over to here. and get this corner of the frame. So it's going to, or maybe over here. Maybe we'll go to here. And so now it's going to do this move. We'll hop out of effect mode here. And now it's going to do this move where it's going to kind of push over from here and land there. So if you have really high res pictures, family photos or whatever it may be, you have really high, you can kind of animate these to take them from being still images to what they were. If you import this, you're going to import this in 1920 by 1080. And yeah, you could resize a 1920 by 1080 image to zoom in, but what's going to happen, you're going to lose some pixel detail because you're zooming in. But since we have the pixels already, since we're in 4K or 8K or some other resolution, you have these really super high, great cameras that are shooting these photos or videos at high resolution, you can work with it. You have opportunities there. And so the opportunity exists. All right, so that is FrameFlex. And the last thing I want to talk about here is input source browser. We're going to look here and we're going to link in again. And here in the link in here, we'll go back to we'll go back to imports. And here in imports, I'm going to look at this. This is this high frame rate footage. And this high rate frame rate footage is shot at 60 frames a second. Now, by default, when this comes in, this is going to come in and it's going to play back at 24 frames a second. That's 23.976 because the project is 1920 by 1080 at 23.976. And so we have that there. If you can't see that, we can just show you. Command Shift equal. In the format settings, this is 1080p, 23.976. So it's 1920 by 1080 at 23.976 frame base. And so it's going at that frame rate. So again, if we go to input source browser, and we go here and we bring in this image here at this resolution, what it's going to do is going to convert this. And again, if we imported this, it forces this to be 1920 by 1080. No questions. It's going to be 1920 by 1080. It's going to make it 1920 by 1080 in there. If we link this in, it can retain all 60 frames. This is coming in at 60 frames a second drop frame or 59.94. It's going to retain all the frames. So we're going to link this in. And now this is going to play back full speed. And so this will play back full speed. Regular here at regular speed. Here's the Globetrotters. A little bit shaky, but footage works, coming in at regular speed, and it's coming in at regular speed. But I may shoot at 60 frames a second, not because I want to reduce motion blur, but because I want to make this slow-mo later on. I want to have the control to make this a slow-mo video. And so here, I want to make this slow-mo. And so in doing so, I can go back to the source settings. And in the source settings, there's this question of playback rate. And so here's source settings, playback rate. It asks us what it's working at. So it gives us the playback frame rate, and it gives us two options, the clips frame rate or the project frame rate. And I used to always get these backwards. I used to always get confused. Well, the clips frame rate, it says it's at 60 frames a second. So it's going to play back. Think about this. It's going to play back at the frame rate of the clip, which means even though the project is coming in at 24 frames a second, the clip is still going to play at 60 frames a second, which means it's going to play back at its regular speed. So its regular speed is 60 frames a second, or it's going to play back there. I'm going to work at that regular speed, and I'm going to work at my regular speed, and I'm going to play back fine. Even though I'm playing back in a 24 frame per second sequence, and I'm playing back in a 24 frame per second project, I am coming in at 60 frames a second. I'm going to play there. Or I can play back at 23 frames a second, which means it's only going to play back those 60 frames 24 times a second, which means it's going to play back slow-mo. So when you play back at the project frame rate, at 24, 23.976, it's going to play back slow-mo. And now this will now play back slow-mo. Really nice, really, really nice moving slow-mo because it has all the frames there to work with. It's really cool. It's really adjusting there. And this will come in the timeline there. So you can adjust this here in the timeline with the source settings. Now, you will notice some things. First off, one of the things I want to point out is that here, because this image right here has messed with some scale adjustments. Let me throw this image in as well. I want to talk about this. Because this image, here's the Globetrotters. Because this image has messed with some scaling adjustments. It has a little S there. The S says, hey, we've done some stuff with FrameFlex. We've done some stuff with the size or the scale of this, like so. Now with the canoe here, we've done stuff with the size, and we also added some color adjustments. And even if you didn't add a fancy, weird downloaded from the internet LUT that you had, even if you just made this from whatever it was naturally, the natural format it was to apply some kind of color adjustments, because different video formats and different video sources, when you bring it from a different camera, may have some video adjustments there. It will add some color transformations to this, and that will be under the C category. Under this, we went from, we adjusted the timing. So the T is for timing. We adjusted the time of this. We adjusted, therefore, the playback rate. So if you ever see these numbers, the T for timing, the C for color, or the S for scale, those are those adjustments. They're telling you that something has been adjusted in these images like so. And obviously, you can see these when you open up the effect editor. Inside of here, you can see that, oh, this has had some color transformations, just some level scaling to full range to video levels. Yeah, that was some adjustments there. We do not have some controls here to speed up or slow down the clip in there. Later on in some other future lesson, we can talk about the time warp effect and talk about working with the time warp effect and working with high frame rate footage in doing time warping, but we'll save that for another lesson. That's going to be something different. Again, in here, we have some scaling controls. So in here, you do have the frame flex that is right there. And obviously, this one has the color adjustment and the frame flex that you can see here. So color adapter and frame flex. Although the color adapter shows up to tell you that there's some color adapting here, there's not really a lot you can do with it. These pull downs don't really show you anything you can really do with it. The frame flex would give you the option for controlling the frame flex and how to maintain and manage that and do all those cool things. It does get a weird thing with your composer window though. So those are your settings in your source settings. Those are settings that people don't ask me about, of how do you do that? How do you fix that? How do you work with high resolution images, or how do you work with high frame rate images? That's the going process of doing so. I do want to talk about one last little detail with this and some last little controls here. We haven't talked much about transcoding. We talked about it a little bit, but we haven't talked much about transcoding. But if you're going to take this footage and transcode this footage, so you're going to turn this into Avid-based media footage. So we have this Globetrotters that's going slow-mo. We have this shot of the crowd, and we have this shot of the canoe. They all have some color transformations on there. So if you go here and you go to Clip, Consolidate Transcode, or you right click and choose Consolidate Transcode, you will see some transcode options that are available. Consolidate Transcode, it asks us some questions. So when we choose Transcode, it asks us some random questions. It asks us under the raster dimensions, keep the source's frame rate or convert the project's frame rate. So let's talk about what that means. If we have something that was shot at 3840 by 2160 at a really 4K or Ultra HD resolution, or even 8K or something there, do we want the final result of this? Do we want the final result of this to be converted to what we scaled into? So if we did frame flexing on this, do we want to convert it to 1920 by 1080? So this image, the canoe, for example, has been reduced in size. It's been reduced in size. Do we want to take this and take these 1920 by 1080s, and when we convert this, convert to a video that only looks like that? Which means, guess what? We can't go back. I'm sorry, that's the frame rate. Globetrotters. So this has been converted to this. So this has been converted to slow-mo, and it's playing back slow-mo. So this, if we consolidate transcode this, what we're saying is under transcode, this is converting this to the source's frame rate, which means this will play back at 24 frames a second. We can't go back and forth. Converting it to the project's frame rate will convert it to the project's frame rate. My guess is 9 times out of 10, I have rarely ever seen a reason why you'd want to do convert. Keep the source's frame rate. If you wanted to play back slow-mo, adjust in the source settings. If you want to make it fast, adjust in the source settings. But when you can transcode this, don't bake that in. Don't bake the speed change into the video so that you can't go back and unchange it. Here, keep source's frame rate. You can go back and change this. Here, it's going to be baked in. And by baked in, I mean you can't change it, which means if it's slow-mo, it's going to play back at 24 frames a second slow-mo. If it's regular speed, it's going to play back at 24 frames a second regular speed. All those changes are baked in. You can't undo after that. I guess if you're working with a client that you didn't want to have the freedom to undo something and you want to give them the source footage, you can convert the source footage and then force it to be unchanged. Down here, you see apply source transformations, and this is more baking in. If we did some coloring, do we want to bake that coloring in? Apply source transformation says, hey, that color is on there now. That color is not just something we can take off, remove, or lose the LUT as we don't want it. That is baked in permanently there. So that is apply source transformations. And then same thing with frame flex. That was the thing I was talking about before, is that if I have something like the canoe, do I want to bake in the resize? If I've resized this to punch in, do I want this to be baked in? My money is probably not. 9 times out of 10, probably not. Again, case you're working with somebody who you want to give them the footage, but you don't want them to have the freedom to adjust it, I guess maybe that would be a reason, but that seems kind of selfish. But here in convert to project frame rate and color encoding, and I don't like either of these. I don't like any of these. I would like the freedom to undo what I do. So this is gonna keep the LUT on there that we can take off and remove. This is gonna keep the frame flex on there that we can take off and remove. And this is gonna keep the source's frame rate so we can speed this up or slow this down to the project frame rate or the clip's frame rate, whatever we need. There's a whole bunch of more settings that we can adjust. There's a whole bunch of more settings hitting other places. And there's more we can do with import settings and also with source settings. There's a whole bunch of other controls we can look at. But I thought that was just a nice introduction into some of the basic settings that exist inside of Avid that you normally don't necessarily encounter in the, Command-Shift equal basic project settings and user settings. Those are kind of hidden settings there that are somewhere else that people ask about all the time. All right, we'll continue on with more stuff in the future, but I hope you got something out of this. I'll see you around.